Apex, welcome to your new bike. I've got this one here. I'm gonna unbox it with you, get it set up so you're ready to ride. First things first, I'm gonna pop it down on its side. We're gonna open these bottom flaps and the ones at the side, just make sure they go all the way back. Then we're gonna pop the box back up and we're gonna reverse it onto the other side to do the exact same thing, so this one stays back. Flip it all back onto the top. Just lifting the box up. And there we go. So everything you need to build the bike is right here, including the instruction manual. So once you've laid everything out, just check with the instruction manual that you know exactly what everything is. So all your tools and your bolts are in here. I'm gonna leave them in here until I need them because they're all clearly labeled. So nuts and bolts and washers you need for step 5 are all these in the top left-hand corner. So I'm just gonna pop those out. So the tools you'll need for this bit are the big Allen key and the big spanner. So we're gonna do the back legs first. It's the straight one. So if you lift the bike up, pop it under so the holes line up. And then we can put the front ones on as well. That's this arrow-shaped one. You want the arrow to point towards the bike. And make sure the holes are lined up. Good. Now we're gonna grab our nuts and our bolts and our washers. So you need 2 nuts, 2 bolts, 2 flat washers and 2 spring washers. Make sure you put these on in the right order. The order goes bolt, spring washer, which is the one that doesn't join up, it's a bit coily, flat washer, and then the bolt goes underneath. Pop it through. Good. So once you pop the first bolt in, don't tighten it up with the nut underneath. Pop the other bolt in so you can make sure that the holes are nice and lined up. And then we can add the nuts onto the bottom. So you want the flat side against the bike. So the flat side facing up. If you hold the nut still, you can twist the bolt onto it if you don't want to lift the bike up. Then you can come in with the big side of the big spanner. You can hold the spanner still and just move and tighten on the top with the Allen key. Tighten it relatively tight, but don't do it up all the way. You can tighten the other one first, and then we'll come back and we'll finish the first one off. So same thing again, nut underneath, flat side up, facing the bike. Hold it nice and tight with the spanner. So make sure these bolts are nice and tight. So when you finish the back, we're just gonna repeat the process on the front. The same nuts, the same bolts, everything the same. So the handlebar column is this one, with all the numbers on it. The handlebar column goes into this hole here. You'll see that it lines up with the shape of the hole. You're gonna need to angle it up quite neatly, and then it will slide in. When you hear that, you can just pull this out and slide it down. You'll feel that it will drop into a slot, and then you can tighten it up as well. We'll come back to this at the end when we set it to your size. The next step, very, very similar. We're just gonna do the seat column. So that's the other pole with the numbers on. Exactly the same. So lining up the holes, popping it down. When you feel that resistance here, pull that out and you can slide it in a little bit further. As with the handlebars, we'll come back to adjusting this a little bit later on. So next step is popping the handlebars on. So the bolts you'll need for this bit are the long, fat bolts that we have left, the ones that you have 3 of. And the spring washers that we have left, the ones that don't join up at the end. So the order as before goes bolt with the spring washer and then the large flat washer on, exactly like that. So it's a good idea before you start this bit to line all of the bolts, the spring washers and the flat washers on all 3 up together so that they're close by when you're doing the handlebars. You can pop them down somewhere safe. And we're gonna grab the handlebars. Handlebars go, so the long central pole will sit in this groove here. You'll see the holes underneath, 1, 2, 3, line up to the 3 holes on here. So just make sure you put that on there like that. And the third one goes behind that handlebar post. Nice. When they're all in there, you want to grab your medium-sized Allen key. So this one, and tighten up these bolts. So when your handlebars are nice and tightly screwed up, we're gonna move on to the next step, which is the bottle holder. So that's this one here. And to attach the bottle holder, we're gonna use the rectangular washer and the 2 long bolts that you have left. Easiest thing to do is gonna be pop the bolts through the washer, or one of them at least. Because the outside of this bottle holder is also rubberized, it might be a bit soft screwing it in at first. But when it's in a little bit of the way, like that, you can line up the other hole and pop the other bolt through. When you've got both bolts, line up the bolts with the holes and use the thinnest Allen key to tighten them up. You might find it easier to use this long end of the Allen key to fit into these smaller screws. Screw one in a little of the weight, and then you can tighten them both in. So the next step is placing the saddle. You're gonna pop this post through the round hole on the saddle here. Now you wanna grab the smaller spanner, and we're gonna use the bigger side of the smaller spanner just to tighten the nuts here. Now you wanna check that the saddle is horizontal with the floor. The saddle will sit in a nice firm position. If you get some wobbling from the seat post, don't worry about it. We'll talk about that when we adjust the saddle a little bit later. The next step is attaching the weight rack. So that's this one here. Luckily, we've got 3 bolts left and 3 washers, so you're gonna wanna grab those as well. And the small Allen key. So this weight rack fits on to the bottom of this handlebar section, and the holes will line up. Only 1 washer per bolt this time. So 1 bolt, 1 washer. Pop it on. And as before, just loosely screw each one in, and then we'll tighten them up after. When all the bolts are loosely screwed in, we're gonna use this long end of the Allen key just to tighten everything up as before. And that is our weight rack. Next step, attaching the pedals. So let's do the right pedal first. The right pedal and the left pedal attach slightly differently. So make sure that you've grabbed the right pedal and you're following the instructions to the T. I'm gonna read through them with you. We're gonna do the right pedal first. It says R just on the top by where the cleat goes in. So we're gonna use our spanner, the big side of the big spanner, to attach the right pedal to the right crank arm. It goes in clockwise, pop the threads together, and then give it a turn. Left pedal needs to be threaded anti-clockwise, so that's the opposite way that you'd think something screws up. Now you need to be very careful as you pop this pedal in to line the thread up, and then we're going to turn it anti-clockwise very gently. We're going to use the big side of the big spanner to gently tighten this up. So I'm just going to gently turn it with this, just a couple of turns. If you find it really hard to turn, it means that the thread is not exactly lined up, so don't force it. It's really important that the thread is lined up. You can gently turn this here, and then you'll see that the pedal moves perfectly. And there we are. So the last step is your final checks. So check over all the bolts, connections, and adjustment knobs to ensure every component is securely tightened before jumping on the saddle. Something you will need to do is adjust the feet underneath the bike. So you can see at the moment, it's quite wobbly here because the ground is not even underneath the bike. The easiest way to adjust this is to see which side is dipping the most. So I'd say the front right foot. You can push the bike gently over. So with this bottom foot, if you turn it clockwise, it will make the foot a little bit longer. So I'm gonna do that here. So keep doing that with each of the feet if you need to, until the bike feels nice and secure on your floor. You'll find that if you're on carpet, you will get a little bit of flex with the bike anyway. Obviously, if you're on a wooden floor, less so. Once all those steps are done and your bike feels nice and secure, we can move on to how to set up your bike. The first thing we're going to adjust is the saddle. The optimum height for the saddle is around about where this hip bone is at the front. I'm going to get onto the bike when we have adjusted it. I'm going to show you exactly where I want you to have it. To adjust the saddle, this back dial loosens off, so it unscrews. When it's unscrewed enough, you will feel it. You'll be able to pull it out, and then the saddle post will drop down. Screw that dial up again and the seat post will be nice and sturdy. So the best way to check if the saddle is the right height for you is actually to get on the bike, pop your foot at the pedal. You will see as your feet go round, ideally the bend in your knee as you're moving through this cycle, when it's at the lower part, should be between 10 or 20 degrees. If you find that you feel like you're on a BMX, like you're really short, and you're still at, say, 45 degrees when your foot's at the bottom, then the saddle needs to come up a little bit higher. If you find that your knee is going out straight as you move through the cycle, then it needs to come down a little bit lower. The adjustment here on the back of the saddle to move it forward or backwards is mainly personal preference. If you've got longer legs and you find that when you're sitting on the saddle, your knees are quite close to the handlebars, then you can move it back a little bit. So we just loosen this dial here. It can move forwards, it can move backwards, and then just make sure it's nice and tight when you've adjusted it to where you want it to be. If you find that you feel like you're reaching quite far forward or you feel hunched over, you can move this forward a little bit. As you do more and more rides, you might find that you want to adjust this position on the saddle or even adjust the height a little bit to make it the most comfortable position for you. I'm going to show you my position that I ride in. So I'm on about a 10 here. I'm 181 centimeters, and I have my saddle pushed back onto +3 on the dial here. Let me show you why. So I find this is the most comfortable position for me. My knees are nowhere near the handlebars as I ride when I'm seated, and also I feel like I can sit upright here as I need to. I'm not reaching too far forward, but if I want to reach for the front of the handlebars, I still have a nice upright position without feeling like I'm reaching too much. That's my preferred position. Obviously, just experiment with a few ways and see what works best for you. The height of the handlebars adjusts in exactly the same way as the height of the saddle. It's this dial here on the front, and you can lift it up and down. I'm going to keep mine here. I have mine on 10 or 11. So this again is personal preference. If you're a new rider, you might find that you want to have your handlebars a little bit higher. This is the reason. When you're standing up, if your handlebars are a little bit higher, you'll feel more supported by the handlebars and it will help keep you nice and upright. As you get more experience with the bike, you might find that you want to drop the handlebars down a little bit, and then you can work on staying upright with your balance and with help from the resistance as well. If the handlebars are a little bit lower, then when we're doing moves on the bike, which we'll get to later, you can get a little bit lower down as we move down, and we can enjoy that range a little bit more. So that's a really simple walkthrough of how to set your bike up. As I said, a lot of it is personal preference, and the reason that we've made the handlebars and the saddle really easy to adjust is because you might find that after a ride, you want to have a play around with the heights and with this movement back and forward. It might take you a few goes to get something that feels comfortable for you, and if you note the numbers down, then you'll know where it needs to be every time if there's more than one of you using it. The power cable plugs into the socket here. Once the power's on, you can connect your device to the Bluetooth on the bike and then tighten up the bracket from behind. Make sure the Bluetooth is turned on your device. Open up the app. On the home screen, it will say bike support, bike disconnected. Click on that, connect to an Apex bike. It should find your bike on the menu, just click on it here, bike connected. The front LED will switch to constant to confirm connection to your bike. So the bike's built, we've set it up, and you're ready to go. We've got plenty of beginners classes, intermediate or advanced, so pick one that you think suitable for you, and I'll see you on the bike real soon.